live. And then as soon as this connects, I will go ahead and click Start Webinar, and folks will start joining us. Live. All right. Taquandra, you should see that coming through soon. All right. So are we all set to start letting folks in? Okay. Letting them in now.
Welcome everyone. If you're just joining us, we're just going to give everybody a minute to get into the room, and we will be starting in a minute or two. If you just joined us, we're going to be starting in just a minute. Just folks are still coming into the room, and we're just about to get started. Welcome everybody. We're going to get started. I know folks are still coming in, but it seems to have slowed down. Welcome to today's event with the youth advisors from the Mastery Collaborative in New York City. I'm Elliot Levine from the Aurora Institute, and we're honored to be co-hosting today's event with the Mastery Collaborative and KnowledgeWorks. For those of you who joined us from outside New York City, this event usually happens in person, but this year it needs to happen online, so the Mastery Collaborative generously invited all of us to participate. For all of the students and staff and families from the Mastery Collaborative schools, I hope you know that you're playing an important role in improving education not only locally, but also far beyond New York City. And I know that's true because the people who signed up for today's event come from 30 different states across the country, and also from countries in Africa, Asia, Europe, and Central America. So the ways that you all are learning and teaching are providing an important example for many people. Whenever we get the chance to hear from students, we learn a lot and we get inspired about the importance of the work we're doing to change the education system. So thank you to the youth advisors for your leadership, and thank you to the Mastery Collaborative for inviting us all to be part of this wonderful event. We're really looking forward to it. And now I'll turn it over to Rebecca Wolfe from KnowledgeWorks.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Rebecca Wolfe. As Elliot said, I'm the Vice President of Impact and Improvement at KnowledgeWorks. And it's so great to be joining you this afternoon and helping to host, along with field innovators and pioneers, the Aurora Institute and Mastery Collaborative and the youth leaders that are joining us today. KnowledgeWorks is an organization that partners with learning communities from across the country to create purposeful paths and places to ensure that each student graduates ready for what's next. We approach our work using evidence-based practices and a commitment to equitable outcomes so that we're creating the future of learning together. And in working the past few years with the Mastery Collaborative, we've gotten to live every part of that mission. The Student-Centered Learning Research Collaborative team at KnowledgeWorks selected the Mastery Collaborative and their research partner, NYU Metro Center, from several dozen applicants to conduct a 2-year research project to understand how mastery-based schools can also implement culturally responsive and sustaining education. At KnowledgeWorks, we were so impressed with these partners' commitment to centering youth voices, not only in the research questions, but in the research methods themselves. And we are so grateful to the youth who advised the effort and made the text so rich. And we're excited to now be able to share the findings from this work broadly across the country so that more places pursuing mastery-based education are better equipped to integrate a culturally responsive, sustaining approach as we tackle recovery from COVID and build anti-racist schools. So thanks again to everyone's commitment to this powerful vision of what education could and should be, for inviting me and KnowledgeWorks to be part of this important conversation with the youth today. I'm going to hand it over to Joy next.
Hey, everyone. It's so nice to be here. Thank you for those awesome words. Rebecca and Elliot, thank you both for being the co-hosts of this event. We're very, very excited about it. Can we jump to the next slide? Thank you. We want to invite everybody to please introduce yourself in the chat box. We welcome comments, questions all along the way. We also want to let you know that we have a lot of young people here today who want to share out with you, both with their voices and in the chat box. We have asked the young people to identify themselves by renaming themselves with MCYA, Mastery Collaborative Youth Advisor. Yep, they all did it, I see. That's awesome, thank you guys. So if you see in the chat, MCYA, that means that is a young person from one of the Mastery Collaborative schools who's reaching out to respond to the current question that's being discussed by voice. So there's kind of a dual channel thing going on here today. You should also feel free to jump in. There is a Q&A function at the bottom. I think people's Zoom atmosphere is different from screen to screen, but there's a Q&A with like a little sort of chat box. You can ask questions of the young people there. We won't be able to get to all of them, very likely. We have a lot of juicy questions for the young people ourselves, but we will certainly leave some time at the end for that. This webinar is being recorded and will later be available. Please share your learning on Twitter if you hear an amazing quote, which almost certainly you will, using the hashtag #MCYouthPanels. And you can connect with KnowledgeWorks, Aurora Institute, or Mastery Collaborative via these Twitter handles. Okay, thank you. Next. It's great to see all of these people here from all over the country. And I know one thing about all of you, which is that none of us needs another Zoom meeting for the sake of a Zoom meeting. So really, really grateful for folks to be here who really value meaningful input from young people. Dr. Chris Emden tells us to teach in the key of life. So young people are seeing things on social media, reading things, hearing things, and it does us really no good, does them no real good to sort of have such a hard distinction between in school and out of school. So we want to be very responsive to our young people and understand that they are hearing and seeing and experiencing the world. And so it isn't, it doesn't make the most sense to just focus on our subject area lessons. And it really, teaching in the key of life, a Stevie Wonder reference from Dr. Chris Emdin, is the way that I've heard it put best. So in that spirit, it has been a very difficult week in New York and in the United States. In the chat box, can you please share something that you want to lift up here today? Something that's getting you through, giving you hope, giving you energy, giving you life, making you happy. I saw a colleague's beautiful baby today in a picture on my phone that really just gave me a big lift. What do you want to let go of? Can you take a deep breath and shake out your shoulders so that we can all be here today to listen to our young people with a clear mind and a sense of peace and receptivity. When we're listening to young people, I always like to think about what do we owe the young people whose input we are seeking. And, you know, people often talk about giving students voice. That we are not here today to give students voice. We are here today simply to listen and lend them our ears. But I also think we owe our young people more than simply listening to them, which is an important first step. And I think it would be awesome if we could reflect together about what optimally would we be owing young people, responsible to them for, when we seek their input on their experience of school and how school could be. So thank you for your responses to that question. And we can go to the next slide. Okay, you can turn off the slides. Thank you, sorry. I'm gonna hand it over to Meg, my dear colleague, who is going to be asking questions of the young people. We're gonna pause at about 4:25 and get your takeaways, and then we'll keep going with panel part 2. Take it away, Meg. Thank you.
Thanks, Joy. Thanks, everyone. Glad to see so many MC friends and friends from other places as well. Young people would love to start by inviting you to share your name and school and grade. And if you want to share something either that you want to lift up or that you want to let go of, just as a way of checking in. Kalkadan, I wonder if you would start for us. Oh, can you come off mute?
Hello, my name is Kalkidan Brahanu from Westside Collaborative. I'm a 7th grader. Currently, my pronouns are she, her, and the question was what lifts me up, right?
Something you want to lift up, yeah, something you want to share with us.
I just sharing my ideas will lift me up, I think. And encouraging other people too.
Thanks. And will you pass it to another panelist? Maybe we can go to Andrea.
I'm Andrea. I'm a senior at Frank McCourt High School. And something I want to lift up today is young people's confidence in education.
Thanks, Andrea.
I think Leslie can go next.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Leslie. I'm also a 12th grader at Frank McCourt High School. Something I guess I want to lift up is more positivity around, because these are some very tough times, so some positivity is well overdue. I'll pass it on to Anthony.
Thanks.
My name is Anthony. My pronouns is he, him. I'm 11th grade. I go to Frank McCourt High School, and something uplifting I like to put out is just me like giving a message that can help someone along the way in their journey and their path.
Thanks so much, Anthony. Josephine, will you check in with us?
Hi there, I'm Josephine. I'm a 11th grader at the NYCI school. I use she, her pronouns, and something that's lifting me up right now is spring and the nice weather.
Thank you. Dante, will you share with us?
Okay. Hi, my name is Dante. My pronouns are he, him. I'm currently in the 10th grade, and something that I would want to let go of is useless attachments to other people.
Thank you. Tahia.
Hi, my name is Tadia Yasmin, and I go to middle school, and I'm a 7th grader. Something that lifting me up right now is students brave.
Thank you. And Nicole.
Yeah, my name is Nicole. My pronouns are she and her. And something that I realized I need to let go is a lot of the stress that I put on myself on my own. Because I know as a person, when it comes to a lot of things, I'm able to put a lot of stress on myself. So just getting rid of that helps.
Thank you. And Joendi, will you share with us?
Hi, my name is Joendi. My pronoun is he, him, and what lifts me up is stop stressing me out. To stop stressing myself out. That's it.
That's a good one, Joendi. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for introducing yourself. Friends in the chat squad, we have lots of other young folks here today. Inviting those folks to hop into the chat. We want to hear from you also. Thank you so much. So we're going to jump in. We want to talk about school feeling like somewhere where you belong. And that's a really weird question this year when a lot of us haven't even been in our school buildings, maybe ever, right? So now, but also always, how much is school a place where you belong? And what does it feel like to belong? And what does it feel like to lack that belonging? Josephine, will you share with us?
Yes. So I think that in my school, mostly because of its very small size, the administration has had a very easy job and have done a really incredible job cultivating a really good sense of community. And my school is very much a place where I feel like I belong. However, I think that in schools that had a much larger size, it would be hard to do that. And the other unfortunate thing is that when you're talking about middle schoolers and high schoolers, because you're trying to figure out where your place in the world is, there's always going to be a certain amount of feeling like you don't belong. And that's part of your coming of age as a person. But I don't know, I think that in creating a really good sense of community helps to ease that as much as possible.
Thanks so much, Josephine. Joendi, what would you like to add about that? How do you experience belonging or not belonging at school?
When I feel belonging at school, I feel much better. When I'm not feeling belonging, I feel less.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to share, Joandy, about what makes you feel like you belong when you are at school?
Art. Art feels me feel like I belong.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Because of the teacher or because of the subject, or why do you think that is?
Subject.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. That's so important, Joandy, for us to think about what we're holding on to when we're making decisions about school art. So important. Thank you. Leslie, you wanted to weigh in on this one also.
Yeah, I kind of think, excuse me, I think Josephine kind of touched upon how when a school committee is as small as my school is also pretty fairly small, the things like the connections that you make with teachers due to how small the school is makes you really feel like you belong because you have that connection or that, I guess, like more than just a classroom connection with a teacher makes you feel like you're more of in a community and less than just a teacher student type of relationship. It makes you feel so much more welcome, and it makes you feel so much more free to express your ideas and not be afraid to kind of talk out or um, disagree with something or kind of be like, hey, I don't feel comfortable doing this. So I just think also teachers, the way they go about their classrooms comes a long way to making students feel like they belong or like comfortable in the classroom.
Yeah, thanks, Leslie. We're going to stay right around the same topic, but will you share more about what makes you feel like people in your school see you and know you and that they welcome people like you? And when you think about what I mean by people like you, I invite you to whatever that means to you, right?
Of course, like I said, our school is fairly small because we are in a shared campus building. But I think all like the different clubs that kids work to collaborate together to form, the way teachers get involved in the clubs is just like so it just makes it so much more of a tighter community because they see that students like if you see a teacher that's there to support you and kind of facilitating the clubs or facilitating discussions in the classroom about certain issues like relating to race, religion, whatever you want to call it, that you feel connected to that subject and they're doing it in a respectful manner and they're really engaged in trying to get like a deepened conversation. It just makes you feel like they actually care and they're respecting who you are and what you respect and what you feel a part of. It just makes you feel so much more welcomed in the environment. And it makes you know that they are someone else who cares, even though they are a teacher. That helps build, I guess, that bond between a student and a teacher that can come much more outside of the classroom.
Thanks for sharing that, Leslie. I think that a lot of times teachers are afraid to talk about current events or to talk about race or to talk about culture because they're not going to get it right. And so it's really important for me to hear you say that having those conversations and taking the time and care to build those relationships is what makes you feel seen and heard and understood. I really appreciate you sharing. Anthony, I'd love to hear what you think about this. What makes you feel like people in your school see you and know you and welcome you?
So added on to Leslie, um, I'm part of a club called PGC. And so in that club, it's like you're helping other like ninth graders. You're talking to them, like trying to get to know them, to welcome them into the community. And so when you have like the enthusiasm to just get to know people or just want to interact or talk more, like now that we're in a remote setting, you just get the feeling of like I want to be close to like many people as possible because you start to build rapport, a relationship. Even when you have breakout rooms, you start to connect more. And this also helps you get work done and whenever you have the time to talk to other teachers or people, they can recommend you to certain people so that you can help them and build a part of the community.
Thanks, Anthony. I love that you shared that that's happening now and it's important now, even when we're remote or blended. Thanks for mentioning that. I want to stay on this idea of how the pandemic has changed our schooling. I'd love to hear from you about what have you missed out on this year that we need to make up to you next school year.
Yeah, so like since this is during this year we are learning from remote, and so for science, like we have missed some labs that we needed to do like in person, but we did it virtually, so I think that we can make that up next year.
Yeah, so you'd like some of those opportunities in person again. That's really interesting. Thank you. Kakadon, what would you add?
I missed out on the real student-teacher interactions that occur when we learn in person, as well as the enjoyable field trips we would take to various locations to learn new things and take a break from school. It was a great way for us to learn when we were not in class, and I love that because it was a fantastic way for students and teachers to connect with each other while having a good time.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that you mentioned things that are academic, but also there's just so much in relationship that we're missing out on. I know, Calcadon, when we talked last spring, you were thinking also about like end of year celebrations and all of that. So I'm realizing that we don't just owe you this year, we also owe you still things from the year before. It's a lot to consider for us. I appreciate it. So with all of this disruption in school this year, grown-ups and people are talking a lot about whether students have lost learning, right? Like we've spent so much time in Zoom, maybe we haven't done as many math problems as we would have. But I suspect that you actually have gained some learning too this year, right? There's been a lot going on in the world. So I'd love to hear what you've learned about yourself, about life, about protest, about our society. What have you learned this year? Dante, will you start for us?
Yeah, sure. So one thing I've learned, well, the main thing was that like to stop making excuses for myself. Like before COVID and the pandemic really hit, like I used to be like a student who was almost always tardy because I couldn't like get out of bed on time, or like something happened like last minute and I was always apologizing. And I kind of just like learned that, you know, I have to stop making excuses and start getting to class on time. So yeah, and I'm starting to get better at that. Like this year I think I have like 98% attendance, and that's only because of like I had to go to the doctor and dentist. So yeah.
Congratulations, Dante. I think that we can all relate to that. It's a lot. It's managing in a totally different way. And I think especially school for young people required a lot of independence at first. So congratulations on finding a way to make that work and learning what you needed to. I appreciate that. Nicole, do you want to share with us what you've learned this year?
Yes. So this year I learned a lot about myself, or since the pandemic started. But one thing that I noticed has changed drastically would have to be my work ethic. Meaning, like before, my work ethic was good. Like I was always able to complete my work. But now I realized that like at the beginning of the pandemic, I was more like laid back and chill. Like I just had to get my work done by 11:59, and that was it. So now, like, I'm starting to think about like the future and all that. And in college, you don't have that much leeway. So I've been working on being more determined and getting my work done when I need to, so it's less of a hassle later. So I realized that was something that it was both a good thing and a bad thing that was brought upon me during the pandemic, but I'm slowly recovering from it and finding ways to better myself.
Thanks, Nicole. So similar to Dante, some of those like self-regulation things and learning to manage. I appreciate that. Andrea, what would you add?
Definitely I've experienced similar to like what Dante and Nicole said. I think that when you have like that regular system of like commuting to school and like seeing people every day and all of that just stripped away like we did last year, I definitely had to rethink how I would restructure my daily routine and like my school and my life and my like works. Like I definitely had to reimagine that. And in doing that, I think kind of like what Dante was saying, I kind of realized more healthier ways of doing things. And it made me rethink how healthy certain things in my life before were, specifically like academically, like is like I would get like what Nicole said, my work ethic definitely took a dip during the pandemic because so much had been going on from March to that summer, and like now it has just been one long crazy month, day, year. But I definitely I've learned that there is this separation between me and my academics, and that I'm more than just what I see on my transcript or what I see on like our grade book and all of those things. And I have learned to more definitively recognize myself and how I am as an individual and a learner, despite what it may look like from how my grades are or how many missing assignments I have, because that does not define my intelligence and my passion for learning. And I knew that that was still there because when it came time for me to apply to college, I knew what I was going to write about in my essays. I knew what I liked. I knew what I loved about my school. I knew what I loved about my past 4 years, my experiences, my community experience, and doing clubs and things like that, and extracurriculars and different programs. And I learned to separate myself from all of those other things that would mess me up and kind of trip me off and give me this more like poor idea of myself.
Thanks for sharing that, Andrea. I think that I love what you said about being more than your transcript. Yeah, we're all more than our labor and our accomplishments. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yasmin, welcome. Glad you could be with us. Do you want to weigh in, Yasmin, on what you have learned this year? And if you'll also introduce yourself by sharing your school and your grade.
Yeah, sorry, thank you for having me. My name is Yasmin. I go to the NYCI school. I am a senior. It is crazy. And that also kind of plays into my answer to this question. So over this past year, obviously we've had to go remote, and there's been more free time, more time to sit with ourselves. But what that's also meant is that there's been more of a need for time management. And so especially over this pandemic, I've really felt preparation for college, which is, a next step that's coming soon. And I think that especially with the mastery grading policy that my school has, which allows for more of that focus on the projects and less on the productivity, I've been able to better myself in terms of how do I prioritize, how do I work on all of these executive functioning skills that are required to get to this end goal. How do I build up to here? And I think that that's definitely going to be very helpful as I move forward. And I appreciate that I got to there. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for making that connection, Yasmin. I know that I heard from all of our young folks, right, that learning to manage their own time was a big part of this switch to pandemic learning, but appreciate the point also that for folks in a mastery-based system, some of that prioritization was already an expectation, right? And some of that self-management and knowing how to navigate was already part of operating in a mastery school. And I think we really saw that last spring, that folks in mastery schools had a more natural transition because it was never about compliance and turn in these 7 things by 4 p.m. So thanks for sharing. So now that we've thought so much about what our wild lives on Zoom have been like, I would love to hear, what are you looking forward to or like really dreading about this upcoming summer? Anthony, will you share?
So this summer, I'm mainly just gonna like take time to like pursue what I want to do, see what like I want to like do for like senior year or even like after senior year. And so whatever path I follow and take, I can bring it into the community of school so that it can pass down more knowledge to other kids and students who might want to pursue that same thing or use it later on for something. And I think the summer is like where you reflect on a lot of things and where it builds up to make you a better person for like school or when you have a job or anything.
Thanks, Anthony. Joendi, what about you? What are you looking forward to or dreading about this summer?
I'm looking forward to see people in person.
Me too. Being able to be outside again when it's not unseasonably warm like it is in New York, cold, I mean, in New York today. Thank you. So this week, living through this week, we've definitely seen race in the news every day, I think, since we've been remote. And I've heard lots of teachers wondering how to support their young people in remote environments with processing all that they're seeing in the news every day. So I'd love to hear from some of you a time when race came up in school, how it was handled, and like, what was the impact of that for you? How did it go? Andrea, will you share with us?
Yes, so I think it has come up a lot because obviously this has been a very eventful year and it is a time of great like change and a lot of things are happening right now. But just I feel like race always comes up, especially in spaces like our history classes, like where we're learning about histories that don't always reflect our diversity. And when we're having discussions that can like get a little tense or heated or have a lot of people want to share out different ideas and it just gets to be too much. Some like my experience in my school has been, you know, even since humanities 10, like when I was a sophomore, in our humanities classes, in our history, social studies classes, we would go into discussions about the histories that we were talking about and like current events and different connections to current events. And whenever we approached a subject about or surrounding race, we would always have like a disclaimer and like a like group agreements sort of, and it set our boundaries before we head into discussion. So it's not just that we're jumping into these different topics and ideas and like facts and things without just thinking about how we would take it in. It's like an inclusive environment where everybody's opinion matters before we even start speaking, which has been very helpful because not only does that help us to be heard, but we also know how to facilitate those kinds of conversations ourselves now. And I know part of you know, my role in different like organizations and like community programs I'm in, I've had to like facilitate discussions and such. So that has helped because I know how that looks like, and it's not always perfect. Like I think that had come up before when we were talking about a different question. You know, like talking about race isn't always perfect. Talking about a difficult conversation isn't always perfect, but everybody is respected and everybody is heard and everybody knows the boundaries. And if we need to stop, we stop. And it's, yeah, I think we have always approached race and other difficult conversations very respectfully and open-mindedly. That wasn't a word. Open-minded. And yes, and also during big current events, we didn't just continue our classes as though nothing was wrong. I know that like I had taken a class called like race studies, and if a big current event would happen, that would probably be what the class was going to be about. But I was also in calculus, and we stopped to talk about like big current events even then. Like when the January 6th Capitol riots happened, we took a minute to talk about it in calculus, and that's just it makes us feel like we are actually people and that we're all experiencing the same thing, so that we can actually decompress before we're expected to get into something and do work and function normally.
Thank you. I think that experience of getting to be whole people within our school environments or our work environments is really rare. And so I appreciate you showing us like what it looks like and the difference it makes for you. Thank you for sharing. Josephine, what about you? A time that race has come up, how it was handled?
So earlier on in our school year, we had a little bit of a sort of a situation. And the thing that stuck out to me most about that was how social media was playing its role. And I think that if you're not a teenager, it's really hard to like imagine how strongly that social media like plays its role in both the modern conversation about politics, but specifically race and racism. And to see on a small scale in a small community how it just like sort of spread like wildfire, the information. And when in the sort of aftermath of that, we were having conversations about like what had happened and like race in general, there were both the fact that I find that kids are not very enthusiastic about speaking on these topics, but I'm not quite sure why. I personally think it's because it's a very large issue and we are kids and we've sort of been feeling a lot of like societal pressure of seeing like all of the things that are wrong with the world our whole lives, and it's been very sort of intense to be growing up in a world that you're constantly bombarded with so much information about all the things that are wrong with the world and how, you know, like it's all collapsing around you. And so I think that in some ways it makes kids not want to talk about that because they want to, you know, kind of preserve their own mental health in a way of like, I just don't want to engage with this right now because, you know, every time I open any sort of social media, I do have to engage with it. And so which I think is actually less useful than having conversations in groups, in small groups in school about that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Thanks, Josephine. That's really useful. I'd never heard anyone say it quite that way, that because it's always on social media, that it can feel like exhausting and protective to not engage in those conversations. But I also heard you saying that you think it's more useful to engage in conversations. Thanks for sharing that. Yasmin, did you want to add on?
Yeah. So Josephine and I do go to the same school, but I did want to take a little bit of a different approach. Yes, there has been a lot of stress. I specifically have deeply felt, the emotional burdens of having to break down all of the things that have been happening around the US and around the world. But I did also want to bring up the point that over the summer, there was kind of some issues that were brought up, and there was some unrest. However, I do think that the important part of that was students feeling as though they needed to have their voices heard. And so while I agree that at this point now, I think it's starting to become like we're starting to lose steam a little bit. But I do think, though, it is still important to have students be, when they, to listen to what the students need. And I think at that point, students needed to feel like they were having a conversation and like they were starting a conversation. And so I really appreciated that my school immediately said, okay, I hear that, let's do something. We had a town hall in which, it was led by the Black Student Union. So they allowed these student voices to control the conversation. And then we kind of had, like students were able to talk to each other and to just kind of get everything that they needed to off of their chest. And of course there was controversy, but I loved the way that they allowed students to work it out. And I think that it is so deeply important to hear what they need. And hearing Josephine also say that the emotional burden, with that, it's what we need now is to kind of step back for a moment. And I think that's also important to hear. And so, whether it may be a need for engagement in a town hall, or whether it may need to be, let's step back, do something silly for a little bit, let's play like a game for a minute, to kind of de-stress. I think that those are equally important. So thank you again.
Thanks for sharing how that happened at your school, Yasmin. I also appreciate you pointing out that it's a skill to learn to have these conversations and for the students to work it out and to lead the conversation themselves. We know as teachers that learning is active, and what are we depriving our young people of if we never give them space to have these conversations and to work out how to have them amongst each other. Thanks for that point. Leslie, you wanted to share with us how adults could do an even better job, or why am I saying even better? Maybe just a better job supporting your generation in dealing with race and racism. What would be helpful?
I guess I think Josephine kind of touched upon how social media is a huge thing right now for our generation exclusively, because in general, just like kids are just more exposed at all ages to social media at a young age. So I guess sometimes it kind of, in a very good way, it helps people, I guess, see different things and hear various different voices, but also in a way it exposes them to hear things that might be wrong or that might not be. So I guess, I don't know what word to use, but I guess nice in a way, and they're just exposed to all those hateful things. And I guess in a classroom, it's more different because they can kind of bring that into the classroom and kind of talk about it, because they do feel like that's sort of like their little comfort environment, talk about it in a classroom when things like that do come up. And I feel like it's also important for teachers to know that it's so, because they're also human, that it's okay for them to kind of have open discussions about it, because there's no, I guess, harm in talking about subjects that come up in this matter. And it needs to be talked about. It can't just go on and never be talked about and kind of be like sort of hidden matter and, oh, this is not discussed in the classroom, because it will come up once, whether you like it or not. It's going to come up because everything is relevant and everything tracks down to one thing. So I think just be open and about the situation, and obviously be aware of what is being said, because sometimes as teachers, you kind of are in that teacher mode, and like nothing harmful about that, but kind of get out of that mindset and kind of I guess in a way, get down to, I guess, a teenager, depending on who you teach's level, and try to think about their perspective and the way they're looking at things, because we all think about it in different ways and we all have different experiences and perspectives that makes us think the way we do. So just, I guess, be more open-minded about having conversations and not be afraid to have them with the students, because it's unavoidable for them to come up.
Thanks, Leslie. I hear you saying, go ahead and have the conversation, and also make sure that you're listening. And I want the adults to like take another second to process that, right? Like every grown-up thinks that they're listening, but if it's not landing for you that that's true, then we need to change the way that we're showing up and listening, right? Thanks for saying that, Leslie. That has me thinking. I really appreciate it. Calcadon, what would you add? How can adults do a better job supporting your generation in dealing with race and racism?
Adults could better assist my generation in dealing with race and racism by taking the time to provide a space and community for students to openly engage with one another and discuss the racism problems that we have faced in this timeline. This will allow us to gain a better understanding of the consequences of prejudice and racism, as well as get an insight into how people respond to it. It would also allow the students to have the opportunity to listen to one another's perspective when we discuss these issues and share our feelings. And from there, the adults could find a solution to help us cope with these feelings that we have. And personally, I am very thankful for my social studies teacher, because she provides a lot of space for students to discuss these issues, and she makes our feelings and opinions feel valid when we talk about these issues. And I value that a lot and appreciate it also, because this is such an important issue that can make some people feel uncomfortable in a way. And it feels like she's listening to us when we talk about this issues.
Thanks, Calcadon. Would you mind sharing with us like why it feels like she's listening? Like, what does she do that makes you feel listened to?
To be honest, when she gives us she lets us discuss our feelings, and from there she also shares her opinions and how she thinks of it, which I feel like that makes me feel safe in a way of sharing my ideas as well, when I listen to what she says and her opinions, as well as what other students are sharing when we have these open discussions.
Thank you. So the teacher shows up as a vulnerable human also. I also was really noticing how often you said that we were talking about feelings, right? Like that's not something we always do in school, and race and racism is really emotional, and it seems really healthy to acknowledge that. So thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate it. Thank you for all of your beautiful answers so far. We are about an hour deep in this beautiful wisdom. I'm going to hand it to Joy for a second, and she's going to invite us to reflect and pause.
Thanks, Meg. Thank you, young people. My fingers aren't fast enough to tweet everything that you're saying, but it is all really resonating and sinking in. And just thank you for taking the time to be with us. It's been wonderful so far. We have many more questions. I feel like this is a commercial break, but I'll be really brief. Natalie, if you could put up a slide, we want to give folks an opportunity to share something that you're hearing. And I would like to ask the young people too, you're hearing from each other, but everybody who's here, like what's something you're hearing that you're curious about or surprised by or confused by or energized by? Please share in the chat. And then because we have a Q&A in the next part of our panel, I want to invite folks to use the little Q&A function at the bottom, or usually on the bottom of your Zoom thing. It has a little chat box, like speech bubble kind of icon, and add your questions there that you want to ask our beautiful youth panelists today. You guys are getting a lot of appreciations in the chat. Is anybody hearing something that's making them think differently. A lot of appreciations. I completely agree. And I also want to just say, Andrea sort of amplified what Josephine's point was earlier, that there's pressure to step up and respond to so many current events that have happened in the past year. Sometimes we don't know how to feel about it, and sometimes everything is just overwhelming. And she also agrees with Yasmin that it's so important to listen to what other people need at the moment, right? So that is literally the definition of being responsive. Thank you. So much good appreciation and love for you guys. I hope you're looking at the chat box. Irene is saying, Andrea mentioned that discussions about race and racism are not always perfect and that that's okay. I wonder what other parts of school you wish were more messy. Are there other parts of school you wish were less structured or were structured differently? So if you could get rid of some rules and exchange some rules for some messiness. Yeah, we can get to that. That's a great question. I love that question. Jess is wondering, energized by hearing how processing current events as a young person differs from social media versus in the classroom. It is useful for educators to keep in mind. Yes. Julie Sana is proud of her school, Hunters Point Community Middle School, a school that's one of the Mastery Collaborative schools, because they're creating some of the things these young people mention, safe, open spaces for students to vent and express their feelings. Ivor Blackman says, it reminds him of the podcast we have here at South Bronx Academy for Arts and Applied Media. Sorry, Arts and Applied Media. Wow, you guys do podcasts. Ivor, we have to talk. That's such a cool idea. So right now we're going to take a 5-minute break. So basically we invited other people from around the country to attend our usual spring event where we always listen to our young people. And we realized that because it was going to be on Zoom, it would be a great opportunity to invite more people. We usually end at 4:30, but we are going to do a part 2 after a 5-minute break. So we're going to give our young people 5 minutes to go get a glass of water, stretch out a little, shake it out a little bit. And we're going to come back at 4:30. If you are here from a Mastery Collaborative school and you can stay for part 2, we're going to be taking questions and hearing more from the attendants in part 2. And if you need to leave, we love you, appreciate you, are happy to be in community with you. And we'd love to make time to talk before the school year is up. So appreciations for your taking the time to be here. And thank you to everybody who's staying on. There are lots of really good questions coming in. Grace wants to add on to the messiness question. What are some things about the structure of this year that you would want to keep? I would like to ask everybody who's really posing a question to put it in the Q&A so that we can attend to it when we get to guest Q&A in part 2. And right now we're going to take 5 so everybody can take a deep breath and relax and sort of let what you've heard sink in, and then come back refreshed in 5 for part 2. Thank you. Everybody wants to take a big 7th inning stretch. That would be super great. We are inviting questions in the chat box. And let's not mark them answered per se, because there might be multiple panelists who want to answer questions. So I'll still be looking at those questions. So I'm going to choose a couple of questions that are in the Q&A. And I want to start with one that actually first appeared in the chat box and then got moved over to the Q&A. Thank you, Irene, Icon. Want to ask everyone if you really want a question answered by the panelists to make sure it goes in the Q&A, because it's kind of hard to distinguish between sort of musings and comments and actual like panel questions. So thank you. So young people, I think, oh, Natalie, if we could take the slide down, that would be awesome. Thank you so, so much. Irene had asked, what are some parts of school that you wish were more messy, less controlled, fewer rules, and you want it to be structured less, a little more free and flowy and messy and open, or you want it to be structured differently? And then are there things that were different this year because of the pandemic that you would actually want to keep going forward? Who wants to speak to more? What do you want more messy? Yasmin? Did I see you raising your hand? Okay, cool.
I also see that Dante chose to answer the question live, so I could follow Dante.
Oh, perfect. Beautiful, Icon. Thank you. Okay, Dante, fantastic. Let's hear from you on this one.
Thanks. Yeah, so I honestly think that the discussions, class discussions, have to be less controlled, because that way kids get to like say what they want, or even like get some stuff off their chest, like that they never would if like class is like we're gonna come here and then go on the Google Doc and then sign off here. Like the discussions, it gives kids an opportunity to almost learn from each other, and like mistakes on what like they're learning. Like I remember in global history, we was doing the Turkish Armenian dispute, and somebody thought that, you know, what the Turkish officials were doing wasn't really wrong, and I thought that what he said was incorrect, and we talked about it, and he kind of saw where I was coming from, I saw where he was coming from. And the teacher, like, even though we almost wasted a whole, well, I'm not going to say wasted, but even though we used a whole class period to talk about it, the global history teacher, he used it almost as a way to use it as like a teaching point the next day. So definitely discussions have to be less messy. I mean, well, more messy, my bad.
Okay, I got you. So yeah, it has to be able to expand, right? If you find a new path you need to go down, you need to be able to have the space to do that. And it gets more complex and does justice to the world. Awesome. Thank you, Dante. Okay, we're going to ask Yasmin to respond to the same thing. What do you want more messy?
Yeah, hearing Dante talk about flexibility, I would like to start with that. And I think that teachers having flexibility in terms of these race conversations, flexibility to open conversations when conversations need to be had, going beyond just, you know, this is the class subject, this is not the class subject, understanding when, you know, when it is simply just important to have these conversations for the sake of, you know, easing, for the sake of, you know, like allowing people to kind of put it out there. But I'd also just like to say one thing that has changed, that I'd appreciate that has changed. Because of the pandemic, mastery grading has kind of meant a different thing in some of my classes now, where it is fully, the grade is entirely reliant on the mastery. Mm-hmm. And the productivity, the smaller assignments that build up to this mastery it is they're not used as, you know, like menial, tedious work. Like these are things that are, you know, will give you feedback on them. These will help you to build your way up to the mastery. But it's up to you to, you know, prioritize. We're not forcing you to deal with this. This is you as an adult now, as like somebody who can make decisions of their own to decide, I would like to work on this. I would like to better myself in building my way up to this mastery assignment, because then you can tell when a student put the effort in, they succeed in their masteries. So I think that's something that should continue to, as it motivates students to push themselves and it gives them some agency.
Thanks, Yasmin. Just a follow-up. You said your grade is now based purely on mastery. Can you explain like what was part of your grade before? Because we pay a lot of attention to what our grade's based on. And we also think about the how of learning and then the what of learning. So there's like the thing you're learning in class, and then there's like, did you do this assignment to get to build your muscles? So I'm curious.
Of course. Previously, we had most of the grading goes to the mastery, but there was a part of it that went to the productivity. So again, you know, that it's not that my teachers were giving us fully tedious work. You know, it is still meant to get you to that point. However, now they've moved entirely onto, it's meant to get you to that point, but we're only going to give you feedback, not grading. So it's not a punishment, you know, when you're not able to do it. And I think that increases the learning. Very cool.
Thank you so much for that. So that was,
yeah, it's not in all of the classes yet. It's only in some of them. But I've noticed also that like your grades do much better when you are able to like focus on like the big thing, the like whatever, the project, the test, whatever it is, and don't get bogged down by all of the little things. And especially in the pandemic, I feel like teachers have been a lot more understanding than they were before, like much more willing to grant extensions, just being more generous with everything, which I found really nice and would like to continue on past this point of like giving us the benefit of the doubt a lot of the time, and like, you know, being like kind and understanding and being like, yeah, it makes sense that once in a while you're not going to get your one of your things done, so it's fine if you're going to turn it in a week or a day late.
mm-hmm. That's really interesting. Again, if you're really focused on mastery, it kind of how you get to mastery and how much practice you need along the way to get there, and how much evidence of your mastery you're able to show. It really varies from sort of skill to skill and task to task. So that's all really interesting. Thank you guys both. Those are both students at NYC iSchool. And Dante is at UA Maker. So this is just a little whetting of our appetite with taking questions from the chat box. And I want to turn it back over to Meg to ask back to our regularly scheduled programming. We have some more really cool questions to ask you guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Joy. So thinking about bringing together these ideas we've been talking about around learning and outcomes, but also around talking about race in the classroom, a really important place where those meet are in our relationships with families, right? So I would love to hear, what are some good ways for teachers to get to know you and your family? And I'm saying that that might be a place where these things meet, because maybe your teacher and your family are from different cultures, right? So it's important that they connect in ways that are meaningful and useful to you. So Nicole, will you share with us?
So I would have to say like surveys or one-on-one meetings helps a lot with just getting to know a student and their parents. That way a parent can establish a connection with the teacher, so they don't feel so like scared or nervous to go to a teacher and ask how their child's doing in a certain class.
Thanks. Yeah. So they already have that relationship before, so it makes the next interactions easier. I appreciate that. Tahia, what about you?
I would say communicating with students Communicating with students is a good way for teachers to get to know students and ask students about themselves as well as their family that the teacher would like to know, so that way the teacher can get to know you and your family better.
Yeah, thank you. Yasmin, I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but I think that you were a few minutes late because you were coming from a student-led conference. Is that right? Were you with teachers and your family? And do you want to tell us about that?
Yes. Um, so we have like these student-led conferences where our advisors, which firstly is a very important thing. Advisory is extremely important for linking students between each other, but then also for the advisors to get to know students and families. And one way that they do this is through these parent-teacher conferences, right? They're student-led though, which brings in a whole different thing, but to keep the conversation short, basically it gives a chance for the advisors and the parents to interact, to get to communicate with each other and to work together in building up the student, because these are the two biggest forces in students' lives, the family and the school and the teachers at school. So this chance to communicate, to work together, and how we can help the student, how we can build up the student and make sure that they are able to succeed, I think is greatly important.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Relatedly, what does it look like when a teacher respects you and people in your generation? So we talked about teachers and families, but what does it look like when a teacher respects you as a young person? Josephine?
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that happens that often. Like the relationship between a teacher and a student is very that, and they expect a lot of respect from us without necessarily giving a lot of respect in exchange. Um, and I think that you can tell when a teacher respects you is when they pay attention to the things you have to say and are open to criticism and comment. I know lots and lots of teachers, like at the end of our who just like will, you know, seem to sort of like be open to input in their teaching, but not actually take any notes ever, or like seem to see you not as an individual but as like a group, as a monolith of like teens, or even in like the little tiny friend groups. And so it's hard to have like a personal relationship, and you feel like they don't know anything about you, and it's sometimes with teachers you can just kind of get the sense that they don't care, which is also, like obviously a lack of respect.
Yeah, thank you for talking about that respect dynamic going both ways. I also loved the detail about teachers being open to feedback, but then not taking any notes. Like, are they even listening? I wonder if you can say a little bit more about, you mentioned that some teachers you feel like know you as an individual and see you as an individual. What does that look like, or what is evidence of a teacher who knows you as Josephine?
Well, I think that it looks like not only just like remembering details about my life, but also like, they ask usually at the beginning of every semester, like, what are some things that you struggle with when you're, I don't know, writing an essay for an English class? And then I can tell that a teacher sees me as an individual and like knows those things about me is when they are looking at my essay and respond to the things that I've specifically pointed out that I struggle with, right? Like if you're asking for input from us, if you're asking for information, I want to then see you doing something with that and not just like having it,
Thank you. I love that specific example. I know exactly what you mean. the beginning of the year survey that never comes back. Calcadon, what about you? How can you tell when a teacher respects people in your generation?
I could tell when a teacher respects me and other people in my generation when teachers make the effort to understand me and my peers, because it gives me the impression that I'm significant and valuable and what I say is taken into consideration and listened to. And from personal experience, when teachers understand me, I feel more linked to them, and I believe that communicates that they respect me and my feelings because I have a good relationship with them. And also, I believe, in my opinion, I believe that those are the basis of gaining someone's trust. Trust and respect, the connections that you develop over time with each other. So I believe that when the teacher makes the effort to build the relationship with you, that gives you an insight that they respect you and value you.
Thanks, Calcadon. I appreciate that. The foundation for trust and respect, and also like for learning, right? Like, who wants to learn from someone who doesn't respect them? Leslie, you want to weigh in on this also? I'd love to hear what you're thinking.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what everyone has touched upon and has said. I think definitely seeing that your teacher is putting that effort into helping you as an individual and I guess as a class as well kind of goes a long way to see like she actually or he actually wants me to learn from them and is actually taking the time out of their day to, like, I guess get to know me and kind of develop that relationship both in the classroom and outside of the classroom, because I've had experiences with teachers just, I guess, interact in the classroom, but then when you see them in the hallway or something, it's not as, I guess, I don't want to like friendly, but like I guess as interactive outside the classroom as it is in the classroom. And I think it should be in both scenarios where inside and outside the classroom you guys have kind of that relationship where you're able to go to them after school, or right now I guess meet after hours of class to kind of get extra help, or I don't get some more feedback on an essay or on a certain test you took. I think that also goes a long way to say that teachers, I guess, want to be that resource for the student. But then also a point I wanted to touch upon was that it also takes the student's part of effort to build that relationship, because it can't just be one-sided. It has to be both ways. Like if you see the teachers putting a lot of effort, but you're not putting a lot of effort, I think it goes both ways. And the teacher also has to see that you're interested in building a relationship with them. And like someone said about like respect and I guess trust, it has to go both ways. It can't just be the teacher kind of putting in the effort. You have to see that students also want to build that relationship, because not always do you leave a school having relationship with every single teacher. There's always this one teacher that you just connect better with than everyone else, but it also takes both parts to build those founding relationships with teachers and students.
That's really interesting, Leslie. As a shy person, it's hard to think of myself as a young person, like putting in effort to get to know teachers. So I really appreciate like the push to do that, that it pays off. Thanks for sharing. So one thing that we all have in common is we go to schools that use mastery-based learning. And an important part of mastery is that we're talking about like the skills and knowledge that you specifically need to know. And so your teachers are always thinking about giving you useful feedback about those pieces of skills and knowledge, and feedback on your work that actually helps you improve. So we would love to hear from you. What is the most useful piece of feedback that you've gotten this year? It can be academic or not. Dante, you have an example to share with us.
Yeah, so something that I learned this year is that my father had told me, right, you should have like 5 teachers who would call you for anything. If they need anything, you should be the first person that they think of to help, right? And at first I didn't really understand, like that's kind of like being the teacher's pet, why would I need to do that? But then I started like showing up stuff. I started participating for things. Even what I'm doing right now, one of my Ivy, she just texted me, "Hey Dante, could you do this for me?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" and I'm starting to become that person that anybody could like lean on. And I think that it's really good because like the school that I'm looking to go to for college, it needs like a few recommendation letters, and just showing up, being there, being like the first person somebody calls for, like having the principal know your name for something, like if you need something, that's like probably the best thing ever, the best feeling ever, because like you kind of feel like your worthiness, and if you ever need anything else, they're almost on it, like on the double. So that's probably one of the best advice I got this year.
I love that, Dante. Thank you. Really related to what Leslie was saying too, right? Like the power of relationships. Thank you for sharing. Anthony, what about you? What's a useful piece of feedback you've gotten this year?
A good feedback I had got this year was mainly like whenever doing anything, make sure to just be yourself. And even if you feel like you don't like it, just continue like to try it at least, because in anything you do, you always want to play like a role where it's like you want to gather other things and try to be something else. Like when it comes to writing, you want to write like a beautiful paragraph to get a 4, but instead of following like how you feel and how you want to make the paragraphs, you want to bring it into another perspective of making it feel like you're trying to be someone else, making a good argument, persuasive essay, but you just have to be yourself. And no matter the mistakes you made, that's what makes you a human, so that you can build off of that mistake.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that framing of mistakes as opportunities to grow. I think that that's like a really important way to be thinking about learning. Thanks for sharing that. Yasmin, what about you?
Yeah, so as I had brought up in the question and answer period, actually, about the mastery grading policy of my school, one of the feedbacks that I had been given was, taking more accountability of, my learning, taking charge of my learning. I think I had been so used to, like with the school system, and my middle school obviously was not a mastery grading school. So I'd been so used to just kind of going with like being taken by the flow of grading, being taken by the curriculum, and not really kind of taking charge, but just doing things. And it became robotic. I didn't have that sense of agency. So when I got to this point, I think, recently I was kind of just told, like, it's on you. You get to choose how you want to go about this, because you have this ability to take charge of your learning. And I've really appreciated how mastery grading policy has done that for me, by allowing me to see what's important with prioritization, and also by allowing me to, like build up and tackle big projects. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I appreciate it. So speaking of big projects, or maybe small projects or assignments, I'd love to hear from some of you something that you have enjoyed working on and that felt valuable to you as like a person and a human being. So if you'll tell us, like, how did you learn it? How were you supposed to demonstrate mastery of it? How did you share your learning? Would love to hear about something you worked on this year that was valuable to you. Nicole, will you start for us?
So we did a project. I had to be in like eighth or ninth grade, but the TED Talk project was something I enjoyed a lot. One of the outcomes, I guess you could say, was investigating. I was just like me simply learning about the topic I was talking about. And I felt like during that project, I was able to show mastery because the rubric helped a lot. Simply reading the rubric and understanding the language of the rubric is what caused you to get the grade that you get. And I felt like just me referring constantly back to the rubric is what got me the grade that I did. And I did well on it because of the language that the rubric contained.
Will you share with us, Nicole, do you remember what the outcome was that you were working on? Do you remember the TED Talk like learning outcome?
Not exactly, but I just know that like there was other outcomes as well, but the investigate one was something that I remember a lot because that was the one that took like the most work, I guess you could say, because that's where we had to research and all that. So that's one large part I remember.
Investigate was one of them. Cool. And is that an outcome that lives across the whole school or just in one class?
In my school in 12th Astoria, a lot of the outcomes are the same for each class. It's just that like depending on what class it is, the language or the outcome may differ depending on what class you're in.
Cool, thank you. So to investigate might look different in science than in language arts. Thanks for sharing. Thank you all. So this has been like a big palooza of us asking your thoughts and opinions about the way that we do school. And I heard some of you mention that your teachers sometimes ask for your ideas, and sometimes you feel like they listen and sometimes you feel like they don't. So one thing that we're really trying to understand this year by having young people involved in their mastery teams and checking in more with each other is like, where are the areas where you always get asked for your opinion and ideas? And what do you never get asked for? And what do you wish you got asked for? So I'm going to ask those one at a time. And let's practice something that we're going to do when we move into the Q&A part. So when we start doing Q&A, if you want to volunteer to answer a question, we borrowed this from Miss Yana Scully at Frank McCourt High School. So some of you already know. Actually, do we have someone from Frank McCourt High School who can explain to us how we use stack? Andrea, can you?
I think stack is like what you say when you're going to add on to something you found really interesting. So I think it's like you're stacking onto it.
Yep. So if you want to add on to the question, you can type stack in the chat for us. And Joy and myself will look through the chat and be mindful of who's taking up space or who would like some more space to share. And we will call on some people to weigh in that have volunteered. So if you're interested in answering, we can pop stack into the chat. What is something that you often get asked for your input about or ideas? In school. Yeah, Dante, start us off, and then if other folks want to jump in.
Yeah, ever since like this summer and like the protest on about George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, something that normally comes up like ever so often is how does like race and racism like kind of integrate into the classroom, or how does the conversations in the classroom help talk about race and racism. And honestly, like I think that's something like it kind of showed that the schools are like caring about how race and racism can be like shown in the classroom, right? Because like I'm pretty sure a lot of like almost every single subject you could talk about Black Lives Matter, you could talk about um how Black lives are being ruined, or even Asian lives. And it's just a matter of if the teacher decides to or not. Like, so I definitely like that. That's something that comes up a lot in like the feedback sheets that we get. And yeah, that's about it.
Thanks so much, Dante. I think I'm going to remember for a long time what you just said, that you can talk about Black Lives Matter in every class, and it's just whether or not the teacher decides to. I think sometimes teachers think it doesn't relate to their subject, And it really matters that the way that you as a student perceive that is that they're choosing not to talk about it. And I think that's right? We have to find ways to be humans, full humans, together in our classrooms. I really appreciate that. Leslie, what would you add about something you often get asked for your input about?
Yeah, so kind of taking it into like a little more in school direction. I really appreciate how most of my classes, or at least in our classes at Frank McCourt, at the end of every, I guess, quarter or semester, depending on how we do it, because we tend to switch things up a little bit. Our teachers kind of ask us our input on the class and about how what we thought worked, what we thought didn't work, the projects that we liked, certain aspects that we liked about the class, and things we wish we saw more of in the classroom. And they also ask like about what the teacher could have done better during that quarter or semester to support you as an individual, and how you think others that will take that class in the next quarter will benefit from it. I just think that's very helpful because you see that the teacher is trying to make a better environment for their students. Kind of connecting to the last question we asked about building that relationship with students, I think that it's a very important thing to see that teachers are trying their best every single class to improve it for the next students to come to take it. I think it's just very amazing to see how they're always thinking about how to improve and how to make it better and how to, like, I guess, ensure that the next set of students has the best experience it can get and take the most out of that class, and just have them be successful in that class. So I think that is something I really appreciate.
Thanks, Leslie. I appreciate that. Andrea.
Yeah, I really agree with what Leslie was saying about how helpful it is that we use our system of giving feedback at the end of every quarter or semester, especially in I know that like at the end of every quarter or semester, usually in our classes, we end with like one big project at the end of the class. And sometimes they don't like, sometimes it feels like that project is too rushed because it weighs so much and there's not enough time to get it done because the semester quarter is closing out. And then that's something I'll experience in a class that I was just in, and then the next quarter I'll hear as we're going through like our course calendar or syllabus or what our final project is going to look like or be, our teachers will mention like, oh, by the way, we heard from our feedback last quarter that this didn't work so well, so we adjusted it, so now it's this. So instead of doing this for the project, you're just going to do this, or we've modified it so we have more time in class to work on it and to conference with us, so you could get feedback on your work and so you could ask questions. So things like that is really useful, and it's also useful if you really, yes, you really follow through with that feedback and bring it up and show how you've changed the schedule, and then just keep asking for feedback at the end of the year. I feel like I didn't realize how helpful it was. I thought it was just an annoying thing that my school did because I would always have to fill out like the feedback stuff, like their Google Forms and whatnot. But I think as I got into more difficult classes, it became so much more useful and I really saw the difference. So just echoing what Leslie was saying, it's so helpful and it feels like we're being seen and heard.
Thank you. I love that your teachers explained to you how they were using the feedback. That's like such an important way to show you that they were listening, unlike the example Josephine shared earlier of a teacher asking for feedback and then like not writing it down, much less like doing anything about it, or writing it down and then never bringing it up again. So on the other hand, what's something you never get asked for input about? This question comes from having a conversation with young people, and we were explaining all the different decisions that happen in schools, and there's some things that teachers do ask about, right? Pacing. What's something they never ask about? Dante.
Yeah. So I would really say like two things. One, the grading process. Like sometimes that could be excruciating. Like I last semester, I had I was trying to get the perfect grades, and then last minute, like right as the final grades was coming through, what I was told was that Friday was the last day, like when final days were coming through, and that's like what I believed because that's what I was told. So I did everything Friday. I did any extra credit, and I got the hundreds. Right, I was proud of myself. And then the teacher took off points for something, which brought me down to a 98. And I was confused because I thought that Friday was the last day, and this change happened on Monday. So sometimes, like the transparency between like when the grades are supposed to go through and stuff, that doesn't really happen between teachers and students. The second thing would actually no, that's all I'm really gonna say. Yeah, this is like the other, just for the other question. So yeah.
Cool. Thank you. So I heard in there deadlines, but also I like that word you used, transparency. Like, I wonder if there could be more honest conversations so that you're not in a position where it feels excruciating, right? Like, what could they have asked so that it wouldn't be excruciating to be graded? I'm also thinking about hearing Yasmin and Josephine talk about how they appreciate that all of their grades are based on mastery now. And this is something that their teachers have been talking about for 7 years. And like, what could they have asked Yasmin when he first started at his school? Or what could they have asked all of their students to make sense of what is best for them? Like, I think that we can trust that teachers are trying to act in our best interest, but what does that look like if that's not a conversation? So if we don't have anything that we never get asked about, what's something that we wish we could get asked about? What are like some dream questions you'd love to give feedback on?
I think about classes offered. Like I know at our school we're very fortunate, and so that our classes are not always the same. So there are some like interesting ones, like lots of modules and stuff like that. And so I think that it would be great if we could have a little bit of input on like what was actually being taught.
Yeah, I love that idea, Josephine. Which could be classes offered, but it could also be within the class, right?
Yeah, totally.
One thing that I wish that I got like asked about is how much like if we need like separate classrooms or two separate teachers, co-teachers for each class, because sometimes what I realize is that during the class, well, since this is mastery grading in my school, if you turn something in and you're not satisfied with your grade, you could do it again as long as you turned it in on time, which is perfect. I love that. Like, as long as you turn it in, you could get a better grade. Beautiful. But what I don't really like is that when teachers use up the class time to almost like go back and fix the problems, because like some people, it kind of like throws off the classroom dynamic, because one person could be all the way ahead on the next lesson, somebody else is behind on 2 lessons ago, and now the whole classroom is kind of stuck on this imbalance. So what I think that we should do is that there should be like a teacher and a co-teacher, right? Because that way, like, there could be like breakout rooms for people who need help catching up, or somebody who needs like the extra support, who's trying to get in on time, but they just don't get it. But when everybody just packed into one classroom, it kind of brings down the entire class. So yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it. I am going to pass it over to Joy for our top secret, not on our prep sheet, very exciting, all-time favorite question of the year.
We do ask this question every year, and it is our favorite question every year. What is one thing, one specific thing that you wish that all adults magically knew about people in your generation, that you wouldn't have to explain it to them, or like just experience their painful lack of awareness of this super basic thing? So what is one thing you wish all adults just magically knew about your generation? Yeah, you did overhype it, May. It's still a good question. Like, I sometimes wish I could say like one English sentence to my dog. Like, if you just wouldn't run away, you wouldn't have to have a leash on. That's it. Now you can go back to being a dog. So if you could say an equivalent kind of sentence to the adults, what would it be? You probably all have them in your mind. Yasmin, let's start with you. Rita can relate to the dog one.
Yeah, I think something that's becoming more and more true, especially for our generation now, is, the power that we hold as youth. I think due to circumstances of the world, we are definitely more adult now, because we've just handled so many things. So I think, like treating us as adults and no longer just as kids, but having these conversations, having dialogue, and less of just, this is what the system requires of you.
Thanks, Yasmin. I'd love to hear from some folks who've been a little more quiet lately. Okay, let's go Josephine, then Dante. And then we're going to take a couple questions from the chat box. Thank you.
So this is kind of a silly answer, but I think that it's got to be technology, especially with the pandemic, because like I simply can't count the amount of time that I've spent like just watching a teacher try to get the whiteboard working, or like futzing with the Zoom, or like not figuring out how Google Classroom works. A lot of the technology stuff, it can keep track of like assignments and all that stuff for you. You don't have to do it. And so I wish there was some way to be like, it's all there already. It's the whole system's there. You just got to use it, and it works perfectly.
But where do I click? I can't see it. The button doesn't work for me. I'm just joking, Josephine.
Yeah, it just, I don't know. The amount of time that I spent like in a Zoom with just like somebody who's like, can't figure out how to do the breakout rooms or something is like, is sort of annoying.
Yeah, somebody's saying in the chat, we need your help. So you're hired to like go around to the Mastery Collaborative schools and explain technology to everybody. Okay, so then we got Dante and then Calcadon. Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the person who just went. Who was it? Josephine. Yeah, I definitely agree with her. Like, sometimes teachers just spend like so much time just like trying to do things that almost come off simple. Like, the person didn't know how to, one of my teachers didn't know how to copy something off the chat and put it in a Google Doc. So everybody was telling them, hit Control C and then go to the document, Control V. And they said that they was trying it. And it's just like, we can't troubleshoot on a device that we can't see.
Yeah.
But also, and this is not serious, if you do this, I'm not trying to throw shade, but the tacky memes and the like, which person are you type thing in the morning, like,
you're over it.
Yeah, it drains morality like 20%. Like, and I know we did this today. It just,
yeah, I get you. There's only so many ways to like connect with other human beings in Zoom, and you're tired of them.
Just ask us how we're doing. It's not a
Yeah, you roasting us all. And you roasted Meg. That is really good. We like to do that too. Okay, Kalkadan, what's your idea? Thank you so much.
I was gonna share how people call our generation lazy, but they don't understand us or our situation, and I believe they should be more understanding, having the fact that we're in quarantine, and most of us choose to hide our hard work, or most of our hard work is not seen by others. So until you get to know someone and their situation, you shouldn't classify them as being lazy. I guess it puts them down and makes them feel worse about themselves.
I so agree with you, Kalkadan. I think it's imperative that we assume good intentions and not jump to like, there's the fact that the work isn't done, and then there's like the why underneath it. And we don't know the why necessarily, and we shouldn't be assuming it's something negative. Completely love that. Thank you. That resonated with a bunch of folks. All right, I'm going to ask one more question that came in from the listeners, and then I'm going to ask Meg to choose one, and then we're going to have a big reflection, hopefully including you guys, youth advisors. So someone asked, I'm going to slightly rephrase the question, because the question asked about a student saying something about race that causes harm, but it could be anybody in your school who says something about race that causes harm. What helps in conversation to make you feel safe or acknowledged that your experience and your identity and your emotions are being seen and respected? And what allowed you to feel your feelings and allowed you to express your ideas and reaction? So when something causes harm about race, what makes it better in terms of interacting with other people in your school?
I think at the beginning when we were talking about safe spaces, I think Andrea sort of touched on it, and how our school kind of at the beginning of every discussion that we have, no matter how deep or how non-deep it is, we always set like these class norms that we all sort of agree on, and if you have a problem with them, like you always have the liberty to speak on that. But I think that knowing that it's okay to like disagree with someone's opinion, and it's okay to have different, I guess, perspectives and different views on a topic is what makes the whole, I guess, conversation going. Because I guess in a way disagreements are inevitable, but they also cause discussion. So I guess knowing that it's okay for you to have a different opinion, but you're not going to be disrespected in a way where what you're saying is going to be, I guess, going to be something that people come at, is a good thing to know, which comes back to the whole thing about the class norms, knowing that the classroom is a safe space, knowing that the people who are in the classroom at that present moment are like respectful and are open-minded and are not gonna harm you with their words by what you're saying is very important. And also, I guess the teacher plays a role in that, on how, I guess, comfortable the teacher is with dealing with these situations, because if a teacher is not comfortable dealing with these situations, then it's obviously going to cause a bigger problem, because the teacher is, I guess, the person in charge. So also the way the teacher handles the problem and the way the teacher establishes the norms and the rules of, hey, this is acceptable and this is not acceptable, goes a long way at setting that example for how the discussion goes about.
That's great, Leslie. Thank you. And I just want to say, for the Mastery Collaborative school members who are here, we have our Talking About Race in School conversations and taking action on race in school conversations for adults to help us be better prepared to react to those moments. So thank you for letting us know, Leslie, how much it matters to be ready and able to respond helpfully in a situation like that. Then we'll take Josephine on that one. We'll ask one more question, and then we're going to be asking you listeners for your takeaways.
I think that in this specific situation, actions usually speak louder than words. And like, if a student or a teacher shows a like repeated pattern of saying things that are, hurtful, the thing that helps more than saying things or like establishing norms at the beginnings of a conversation, although those things are always very helpful, is changed behavior. Like whatever the administration or whoever needs to do to get that person to be like less hurtful, like you would with anything, like that's the real sort of thing, that like the action of the person needs to be changed. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Okay.
Okay, next question. And let's use the stack thing. Priyanka, who is a phenomenal 6th grade math teacher, she's working with 6th grade students that she has not met very many times. I'm not quite sure what's up at MS 442, but she's asking, they haven't really been able to sort of like help the incoming students to the school to get that mastery mindset, developing the mindset and like all of the ways of like sort of like the whole revision system and like redoing things and the sort of flexible pacing and like putting in more work to build your muscles more so your mastery grows. So all of that sort of ground conditions for being a student in a mastery-based school, it's been harder to do that because of the pandemic. And she's curious about if there are any students who can share ideas about what helped you when you entered your school to actually embrace and get traction with the mastery system. Jump in the stack. When you first go back to when you first started at your school, kind of how did you react to the mastery system and what helped you sort of get a foothold there? It's a cool question, Priyanka. Thank you. Okay, let's go Leslie to start with.
Well, at our school, I think someone from my school, I think it was Anthony already mentioned it. We have a program called Peer Group Connection, which is PGC, which is, I honestly thought it just, I guess, helped me change the way I went from 9th grade to now 12th grade present day. It just changed the whole way I viewed school. I don't know, it just helped me be more centered. So basically it just picks a group of like about 20 kids who are in either 11th or 12th grade and gives them a group of students, 9th grade specifically, and kind of mentors them throughout the year with various outreaches about the school community, about being respectful, about college, just about anything you can think of, because in reality, they've already been through that 9th grade experience of really not knowing. And over the years, I've seen that the 2 teachers that are in charge of mentoring the mentors for them to then mentor the 9th graders have really implemented how they come in knowing the outcomes, because most of them do not come from schools that are mastery collaborative schools. So we try to kind of explain to them, like within the first 2 weeks, the outcomes and how they work and how they're not just about you got a 3 in justify and that's it, how that helps you kind of grow and what the outcomes actually mean by, I guess, breaking them down into more than just the word justify, more than just the word innovate. And it actually gets them to kind of think in that mindset. And looking back from when we have started PGC, at least from my group, I can say that the kids have a well-rounded knowledge of what the outcomes are, and they feel more comfortable asking questions about, well, how does XYZ outcome help me to better an XYZ outcome? So it just helps them to kind of in general have a better view of the school and implement that into helping them be more comfortable with people. So having, I guess, 2 mentors to go to who are students and not teachers, because they might not feel comfortable going to a teacher, because especially now we have not met them. Well, I've only met like 3 of them in person because I am a blended student, but most of them I have never seen them. I don't know what they look like. I only know it by the sound of their voice because they don't turn on their cameras. So it's very hard, but we have that connection already through a screen, and they have emailed me many times with questions about anything you can imagine. So I think kind of having mentors, or I don't know, something implemented like that really helps build the connection over time, because it's not going to be right away. It takes time for that connection to build. So I think programs like that really help them feel comfortable with someone other than a teacher.
Phenomenal. That was an amazing answer. And you're sort of reminding me of students at your school and at UA Maker and at Twills of Astoria have all told me that eventually they start thinking like the teachers, not thinking like the students. And what you just said kind of showed that. Priyanka's expressing appreciation. She's going to try PGC. See, that's how the Mastery Collaborative works. It's amazing. That's beautiful. It's a good place to stop. Natalie, if we, and just giant thank you to the students from the Mastery Collaborative and to your schools also. And we'd like to ask Natalie to put up our second to last slide, or the one about reflections and takeaways. Thank you. So inviting everybody, students too, to share takeaways and intentions, and thank you to the young people. You're incredible. This was incredible. The young people always lead the way, and it happened again here today. So inviting folks who are here to share thanks, takeaways, and intentions. I know they take a little while to type. One of my takeaways is the crucial thing we owe, like going back to what I asked at the beginning, like what do we owe young people when we ask for their input? Follow through is a big one. You know, the students who said, I think it was Andrea, I'm not totally positive, who said, I wasn't sure like why I was filling out all these endless Google Docs giving feedback at the end of courses, but then I was in a course and they said, it's this way because that's the feedback we got. And that's fantastic. We're all really busy adults, chopping up our time into 1,000,000 little pie pieces. But having a through line of you remembered and you acted on the input that you got is very powerful. Okay, we're getting some takeaways and intentions. Meg is saying, so many young people get the sense we're not listening. How can we show we are listening? Molly is saying her intention is to make sure she uses her feedback and input from students, just what we were talking about. Thanks, Molly. And to share when she's using feedback and input from previous students. Yeah, it's like a chain. That's great. Kristen is sharing, thinking how to incorporate more student input into what is taught in the course. Amazing. Anne-Marie is saying there's always so much for adults to learn from listening to young people and their experiences and opinions. Elliot from CompetencyWorks is sharing, as anticipated, we learned so much from you and you helped us get inspired to continue supporting the kind of education you're all doing at your MC schools. Lots of thanks, so much thanks. You know what, we're just gonna package up all this thanks and email it to all you guys. And I just want to end with an intention I see from Eva. Instead of giving an art project to students to demonstrate what they learned through research, she's going to ask her students what kind of art project they would like to do to demonstrate what they learned and researched about. Amazing. And Danielle, the principal of Frank McCourt, is immediately going to retire and turn the school over to her students who are here today. That makes sense to all of us. Beautiful, giant thank you. Thanks everyone who joined us today, and giant thanks to KnowledgeWorks and CompetencyWorks and Aurora Institute for the collaboration. I think there's one more slide. Juliana Charles Brown, it is good to have you here. So I think there's some links to throw into the chat. If Deb, you can grab those and throw them into the chat. Giant thank you, youth advisors. You can learn more about the Mastery Collaborative or KnowledgeWorks or CompetencyWorks. We're all easy to find on the web, on the internets. Big giant thank you. DeQuandra is saying, amazing job, young people. Thank you for your wisdom and fearlessness in sharing your true feelings with us. Beautiful.
Young people, I hope you'll join us tomorrow at 3 p.m. to debrief. Also, the link to that meeting is in your document. Big appreciations.
Beautiful. Thank you, Deb. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for being here. Have a beautiful evening. Over and out. Have a good night.